Evidence for evolution. Diversity of life. In Subunit 1, your timeline showed that the Earth formed around 4,500 million years ago, or MYA. Around 3,500 million years ago, the first living organisms appeared. Since then, millions of species of organisms have lived and died on the planet. Today, there is an incredible diversity of life on Earth, from unicellular organisms like bacteria to multicellular organisms like plants, fungi, and animals. There is also much diversity within each particular category of life. Even within a single species, like domesticated dogs, there are many different variations. Dogs come in many different shapes, sizes, and colors, and each breed of dog has unique characteristics and qualities. Looking at the diversity of species from the unit so far, it might seem that each form of life is unique and completely unrelated. However, scientists have gathered a great deal of evidence to show that the diversity of life on Earth is the result of the process of evolution. Evolution is a change in the characteristics of a population of living things over time. At first, all living things on Earth were simple, single-celled organisms. Much later, the first multicellular organisms evolved, and after that, Earth's biodiversity greatly increased. The theory of evolution explains how populations of living things have changed through time. Fossil, anatomical, and developmental evidence shows that current forms of life have descended with modifications or changes from earlier forms of life. If we look back in history, we can find evidence of the common ancestors of present life forms. The theory of evolution explains both the unity of life as a result of descent from common ancestors, as well as the diversity and variety of biological life we see around us. Stop and check. What do scientists mean by the diversity of life? What is the theory of evolution? Evidence of evolution. At the heart of evolutionary theory is the basic idea that life has existed for billions of years and has gradually changed over time. Overwhelming evidence supports this fact. Scientists continue to argue about particular details of evolution, but the theory of evolution itself is widely accepted. The history of living things is documented through multiple lines of evidence that converge to tell the story of the evolution of life through time. In the Explore lesson, you reviewed some of the evidence to support the theory that life has evolved over time, including evidence from the fossil record and evidence found by analyzing the anatomical similarities between organisms. Fossil evidence. The fossil record provides us with snapshots of the past. When put together, this record helps us see evidence of evolutionary change. Fossil evidence clearly shows that life is old and has changed over time. As you learned in Subunit 1, the location of a fossil in the Earth can help to tell us about how old the fossil is. Fossils found in deeper layers of the Earth are older than those found in upper, newer layers. Scientists can also use radiometric dating to determine the age of fossils. An evolutionary tree is a branch diagram that shows the relationships between different species. The evolutionary tree on the right shows the relationships between modern horses, Equus, and at the top of the tree and their older ancestors below. Similar to rock layers, the oldest species are placed at the bottom. Evolution would predict that the horse hoof evolved gradually from the four-toed foot of Hyracotherium to in-between forms with fewer toes, and then to the single-toed foot of Equus. Fossils have been found confirming that these in-between forms did exist. As you can see in the image, each branch tip on the tree of horse evolution indicates a different genus, though the feet of only a few genera are illustrated to show the reduction of toes through time. Fossils that can show the intermediate forms between an ancestral form and that of its descendants are referred to as transitional forms. There are numerous examples of transitional forms in the fossil record, providing an abundance of evidence for change over time. The horse images show transitional forms of horses through time. The oldest horse fossils show what the earliest horses were like. These early horses were about the size of a fox and they had 4 long toes. Additional fossil evidence shows that these early horses lived in wooded marshlands, where they probably ate soft leaves. Over time, the climate became drier and grasslands slowly replaced the marshes. Later fossils show that horses changed as well. Horses became taller, which would help them see predators while they fed in tall grasses. Horses evolved a single large toe that eventually became a hoof. This would help horses run swiftly and escape predators. Stop and check. What is a fossil record? How does a fossil record provide evidence for the evolution of life? Anatomical evidence. Evolutionary theory predicts that related organisms will share similarities that come from common ancestors. Similar characteristics due to relatedness are known as homologies. Homologies can be revealed by comparing the anatomies of different living things, looking at cellular similarities and differences, and studying embryological development. Homologous structures in tetrapods. In the Explore lesson, you decided that some legs were not like the others. The matching limbs in the lesson have bones, and you eliminated the limbs that do not have bones. Since the octopus, sea star, and grasshopper limbs do not have bones, you concluded that they are probably not homologous to tetrapod limbs. Homologous: lizard, bird, human, whale. Not homologous: octopus, sea star, grasshopper. The 4 limbs you picked out all belong to tetrapods, animals with 4 legs. Homologous tetrapod limbs. Notice how the tetrapod limbs are similar to one another. The limbs are all built from many individual bones. The limbs are all variations of the same basic bone layout. 1 long bone attached to 2 other long bones. Here you can see the same bones labeled in different limbs of tetrapods. Humerus, ulna, radius, carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges. Frogs, birds, rabbits, and lizards all have different forelimbs, reflecting their different lifestyles. But those different forelimbs all share the same set of bones, the humerus, radius, and ulna. These are the same bones seen in fossils of the extinct transitional animal Eusthenopteron, which demonstrates their common ancestry. Eusthenopteron: frog, rabbit, lizard, and bird. Stop and check. What are homologous structures? What is one example of a homologous structure in tetrapods? Developmental similarities. Comparing embryos. An organism's development may contain clues about its history that biologists can use to build evolutionary trees. Ancestral characteristics are often, but not always, preserved in the early stages of an organism's development. One of these early stages of life is the embryo. Both chicken and human embryos go through a stage where they have slits and arches in their necks, similar to the gill slits of fish. These structures are not gills and do not develop into gills in chickens and humans. However, the fact that they are so similar to gill structures in fish at this point in development supports the idea that chickens and humans share a common ancestor with fish. Thus, developmental characteristics, along with other lines of evidence, can be used for constructing evolutionary trees. Chicken embryo, human embryo, slits homologous to fish gill slits, and a tail. Stop and check. What is one piece of evidence that can be used to support the idea that humans, chickens, and fish share a common ancestor?